The massive broadcasting station floated in space like a giant metal flower. Its silver walls stretched for miles in every direction, holding the most important event in galactic history inside. The main hall, thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in their designated sections. Each species had their own area marked with colorful banners and symbols. Earth had been part of the Galactic Federation for 20 years now, but humans still felt like outsiders. Most alien races looked at them with curiosity or pity. The humans were new and small and seemed so fragile compared to the mighty warriors from other worlds. Dr. So Young sat in the front row of the human section. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she wore the official blue uniform of Earth Diplomatic Corps. She had been chosen to represent humanity at this special military demonstration. Her hands shook slightly as she watched the massive creatures around her. The event was called the Warrior Showcase, where each member species would show off their strongest fighters. It was meant to build friendship and respect between different races, but So Young knew it was really about showing who had the most power. In the galaxy, giant screens hung from the ceiling showing the broadcast to billions of viewers across thousands of worlds. The camera drones buzzed around like metal insects, capturing every moment for history. The excitement in the air was thick enough to touch in the reptilian section. Commander Tae-min stood 8 feet tall. His green scales caught the bright lights, making him look like a living emerald. His yellow eyes swept across the crowd, looking for weakness. His massive arms were crossed over his chest, showing muscles that could crush steel. His tail swished behind him like an angry snake. The other reptilian warriors around him were almost as impressive. Their species had evolved on a harsh desert world where only the strongest survived. They had been the military backbone of the Federation for over 300 years. No one had ever successfully challenged their dominance in combat. Host of the event was a floating blue energy being called Zix. Its voice echoed through the hall without need for speakers. Good beings of the galaxy, it announced, welcome to the annual Warrior Showcase. Today, we celebrate the strength and skill that keeps our Federation safe from threats. The crowd cheered and applauded, but the sound was different for each species. Some clapped with hands, others clicked claws or tentacles together. The humans clapped politely, but their applause seemed tiny compared to the thunderous noise from the larger aliens. First to demonstrate were the crystalline guards from the mineral rich world of Quartz 7. Their bodies were made of living diamond that could deflect energy weapons. They moved through a series of combat forms that made rainbow light dance across the walls. The crowd watched in amazement as they shattered practice targets with their bare hands. Next came the Shadow Walkers from the dark side of Umbral Prime. They could bend light around their bodies, becoming nearly invisible. Their demonstration involved sneaking past security systems and taking down targets without being seen. Even the cameras had trouble following their movements. The metal shapers from Iron Core showed how they could transform their robotic bodies into any weapon they needed. Swords, spears, hammers, cannons. Their limbs shifted and changed like liquid metal. The practice dummies they fought against were reduced to scrap in seconds each. Demonstration was more impressive than the last. The humans in their section began to look smaller and more out of place. So Young felt her stomach tightening as she realized their turn was coming soon. What could Earth possibly show that would compare to these incredible displays of power? Commander Tae-min had been waiting for this moment all day. He stepped forward from the reptilian section, his heavy footsteps making the floor vibrate. The crowd fell silent as his massive form approached the center stage area. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stones as he spoke into the microphone that floated near his head. Fellow warriors of the galaxy, he began, we have seen many impressive displays today, but I wonder about our newest members. His yellow eyes fixed on the human section with undisguised contempt. The Earthlings joined us only 20 years ago. They are soft creatures with no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced strength. They claim to be warriors, but what have they ever faced? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some aliens nodded in agreement, while others looked uncomfortable. The cameras zoomed in on the human section where So Young sat frozen in her chair. These pink-skinned beings live on a gentle world with mild weather and abundant food. Tae-min continued, his voice getting louder. They have never known true hardship or real combat. Their bodies are weak, their bones break easily, their muscles are pathetically Reptilian warriors behind him hissed their approval while aliens from other sections began to whisper among themselves. The humans looked like they wanted to disappear into their chair. So Young knew she had to respond, but what could she say? It was true that humans seemed weak compared to these massive creatures. Earth had no warriors who could match an 8-foot-tall reptilian in single combat. Their military technology was still decades behind most Federation standards. I challenge any human warrior to face me in combat right here, right now. Taemin declared, his arms spreading wide. Let the galaxy see the truth about Earth military. Might let us witness how your strongest fighter compares to a real warrior. The silence that followed was deafening. Billions of beings across the galaxy waited to see what would happen. The camera drones moved closer to the human section, capturing every detail of their obvious discomfort. So Young felt sweat beading on her forehead. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. If humans refused the challenge, they would look like cowards for the rest of galactic history, but if they accepted, someone would probably die on live television. The human military escorts who had come with the delegation were all seated in the back rows. They were good soldiers, but none of them were equipped for this kind of situation. They were trained for modern warfare with weapons and technology, not bare-handed combat against alien monsters. The seconds ticked by, feeling like hours. The pressure built as more and more alien eyes turned toward the human section. Some looked curious, others seemed hungry for the entertainment of watching a human get crushed. From somewhere in the back of the human section, a calm, clear voice cut through the tension. I accept the challenge. Every head turned to see who had spoken. Lieutenant Hyun-woo Park rose from his seat in the last row. He was wearing a simple black military uniform with minimal decorations. His face was calm and serious, showing no emotion at all. He was not particularly tall or muscular by human standards. Standing at average height with a lean build, he looked even smaller next to the alien giants around him. His black hair was cut short in military style, and his dark eyes showed no fear or excitement. So Young stared at him in shock. She knew Hyun-woo was part of their security detail, but she had barely noticed him during the long journey to the broadcasting station. He had been quiet and professional, staying in the background while others handled the diplomatic duties. The crowd erupted in surprised whispers and gasps. Many aliens had never seen a human volunteer for anything dangerous. They had assumed all Earthlings were cautious and peace-loving creatures who avoided conflict. Min grin spread across his reptilian face, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth that could tear through metal. Finally, he growled, a human with some courage. Your death will be educational for your species, Hyun. Wu walked down the aisle between the seats, moving with quiet confidence. His steps were measured and precise, like someone who had walked into danger many times before. The other humans watched him with mixture of admiration and horror. As he reached the center of the hall, the energy barriers began forming around the designated fighting area. The crowd pressed forward to get better views, while camera drones positioned themselves for optimal angles. The galaxy was about to witness something that would change everything forever. The fighting arena materialized in the center of the broadcasting hall like magic. Advanced holographic technology created a perfect circle 30 feet across. The floor was solid and smooth, while invisible energy barriers rose up to protect the audience from any stray attacks. Hyun Woo removed his black military jacket and handed it to another human soldier. His movements were calm and methodical, like someone preparing for a routine training exercise. He rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt, revealing lean but well-defined arms. Alien commentator, a purple creature with 6 eyes, began explaining the situation to viewers across the galaxy. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications, he announced, what we are witnessing is highly unusual. The human species has never participated in formal combat demonstrations. Camera drones circled around Hyun-woo, capturing every detail of his appearance. The commentator continued his analysis. Humans possess no natural armor plating, no enhanced bone density, no claws or venomous capabilities. Their muscle mass is significantly below galactic average for sentient species. The crowd listened with growing excitement. Many had never seen a human up close before. Earth was still considered a backwater planet by most galactic standards. The idea that one of these small pink creatures would fight a reptilian warrior seemed like elaborate entertainment. In The reptilian section, the other warriors, were already celebrating their commanders. Inevitable victory, they hissed and clicked their approval as Tae-min stepped into the arena. His massive form blocked out the overhead lights, creating long shadows across the fighting surface. Each step he took made the solid floor vibrate slightly. His 8-foot frame was covered in thick green scales that had deflected energy weapons in dozens of real battles. His yellow eyes glowed with predatory hunger as he flexed his enormous hands. The claws extending from his fingertips were each 4 inches long and sharp enough to cut through starship hull plating. His tail whipped behind him like a living weapon, capable of breaking bones with a single strike. His species had evolved these natural weapons over millions of years. Tae-min had fought in the border wars against the insectoid invaders from the Outer Rim. He had personally killed over 200 enemy soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. His reputation as an unstoppable killing machine was known throughout the galaxy. As he entered the arena, the crowd noise swelled to deafening levels. Alien spectators from dozens of different species cheered and roared their approval. The sound was like being inside a hurricane of voices, clicks, hisses, and electronic tones. Meanwhile, Hyun-woo stood quietly in his corner of the arena. He did not take any fighting stance or make threatening gestures. Instead, he simply waited with his hands at his sides. His breathing was slow and steady, showing no signs of stress or fear. So Young watched from the human section with growing dread. She had read Hyun-woo's military file during the journey, but it contained mostly classified information. She knew he was a Navy SEAL, but had no idea what that really meant in terms of combat ability. The other humans around her were equally nervous. They whispered among themselves about the obvious size difference and the likelihood of their representative surviving more than a few seconds. Most were already planning how to handle the diplomatic aftermath of a very public death. The alien crowd was having a very different conversation. Many were placing bets on how quickly the fight would end. The general consensus was that Tae-min would finish the human in under 10 seconds. Some optimistic aliens gave Hyun-woo as long as 30 seconds. A group of gaseous beings from the Nebula Collective were discussing human anatomy in clinical terms. Their analysis concluded that a single blow from Tae-min would be sufficient to cause fatal injuries. The human's fragile skeletal structure simply could not withstand that kind of impact. The energy beings from the lightning worlds were more interested in the psychological aspects. They wondered if the human understood what was about to happen to him. Perhaps his species' lack of combat experience had left him unable to properly assess danger. Only a few species in the audience showed any concern for what they were about to witness. The peaceful traders from the garden systems looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. Their culture valued life above entertainment, and they quietly discussed leaving before the violence began. Tae-min raised his arms above his head and let out a thunderous roar that echoed through the entire station. His voice was amplified by the arena's sound system, making every being present feel the vibrations in their bones or equivalent body parts. Human, he growled, his words dripping with contempt. I have killed warriors from a dozen different worlds. Your soft species has never faced a real predator. I will make this educational by showing the galaxy exactly how weak you truly are. The referee appeared as a shimmering ball of light that floated between the two fighters. It spoke in a neutral, electronic voice that translated automatically into every language present. The rules are simple, it announced. No weapons of any kind. Fight continues until one opponent cannot continue. Medical teams are standing by. Hyun-woo finally moved for the first time since entering the arena. He bowed slightly toward Tae-min in a gesture of respect. Thank you for this opportunity, he said in perfect galactic standard. His voice carried no trace of fear or bravado, just professional courtesy. This simple act of politeness confused many in the audience. They had expected the human to either beg for mercy or make empty threats. Instead, he was treating this like a formal military exercise. The cameras zoomed in on his face, looking for any sign of the terror he must be feeling, but Hyun-woo's expression remained completely neutral. His dark eyes showed the same calm focus that had carried him through countless dangerous missions on Earth. He had faced enemy soldiers, armed insurgents, and terrorists bombers without flinching. A large lizard was just another opponent. The countdown began echoing through the hall like a funeral bell. 10, 9, 8, 7. The crowd fell silent except for the occasional click or hiss from excited aliens 6-5. 4-3. The energy in the room was electric with anticipation. 2-1. Begin Taemin exploded into motion with incredible speed for such a massive creature. His powerful legs launched him across the arena like a living missile. His right fist swung toward Hyen Wu's head with enough force to shatter concrete. The crowd held its breath waiting for the sickening impact. But something impossible happened. Hyen Wu was no longer standing where he had been. The human had moved with liquid grace, stepping to his left and forward at the same time. His motion was so smooth and precise that many cameras missed it completely, while Taemin's devastating punch cut through empty air. Hyen Wu flowed inside the reptilian's guard like water, finding the smallest opening. His right hand moved upward in a motion too fast for most eyes to follow. Sound of impact echoed through the arena like a gunshot. 3 weeks after the broadcast, everything in the galaxy had changed. Diplomatic relationships that had been stable for centuries were suddenly in chaos as species scrambled to understand the new reality that human military power represented. The Reptilian Empire had moved 3 massive battle fleets to the edge of human space. Each fleet contained hundreds of warships armed with weapons capable of destroying entire planets. Their commanders burned with desire for revenge against the species that had humiliated their greatest warrior. Emperor Wu Jin, the supreme leader of the Reptilian Empire, sat on his throne of polished bone while his war council presented their plans for attacking Earth. The throne room was carved from a single piece of black stone and decorated with the skulls of conquered enemies. The human who killed Commander Taemin must have used forbidden technology. The emperor hissed, his yellow eyes glowing with rage. No natural creature could generate that much force. We demand immediate surrender of this weapon for examination. His military advisors agreed that the fight had been won through trickery rather than skill. The idea that a small pink creature could legitimately defeat their champion was simply unacceptable. To their warrior culture, they needed an explanation that preserved their sense of superiority. Meanwhile, the Mantis Collective had begun secret negotiations with dozens of aggressive species across the galaxy. Their insectoid leaders saw an opportunity to eliminate humanity before they became a greater threat. The massive hive ships began moving towards strategic positions in the dark spaces between star systems. Hidden fleets gathered while encrypted communications coordinated plans for a simultaneous strike against all human colonies. The goal was complete extermination before Earth could develop whatever superweapon had killed Taemin. But Earth was not defenseless or unprepared. Admiral Jin Su had spent 20 years building a military force that could survive against overwhelming odds. Human doctrine was based on fighting larger, stronger opponents through superior tactics and technology. In the underground bunker beneath Earth Command, Admiral Jin Su met with his top field commanders. The room was filled with men and women who had trained their entire lives for the war that was now coming. Colonel Dong Hyen Lee stood at attention before the admiral. His weathered face showed the scars of dozens of battles fought in Earth's special operations forces. He commanded the elite units that would spearhead any defensive action. Admiral, we have identified 17 different species moving military assets toward our territory. Colonel Dong Hyen reported professionally. Their combined forces outnumber our fleet strength by approximately 40 to 1. The numbers would have been terrifying to most military leaders, but Admiral Jin Su simply nodded. These odds were exactly what human forces had been designed to handle. Earth had learned through centuries of warfare that superior numbers meant nothing without superior strategy. Our advantages remain unchanged, the admiral replied calmly. We know their weaknesses. They do not understand our capabilities. We will use their confidence against them, just as we always have. Captain Min Ji, the leader of Earth's Intelligence Division, presented detailed analysis of alien military capabilities. The data had been gathered over 20 years through careful observation and occasional covert operations. The reptilian fleets are powerful but predictable, she reported. Their tactics have not changed in 300 years. They rely on overwhelming firepower and direct assault. They cannot adapt when their initial plan fails. Earth had been studying alien military doctrine since first contact. Every species had patterns of behavior that could be exploited by commanders who understood how to think asymmetrically. Human soldiers excelled at turning enemy strengths into weakness as lieutenant. Han Wu entered the briefing room quietly and took a seat near the back wall. His presence had been requested because his victory over Tay Min had triggered the current crisis. Everyone wanted to understand how he had achieved the impossible, Admiral. Jinsu looked at the Navy SEAL with respect. Lieutenant, your action in the arena has accelerated our timeline by several years. We had hoped for more preparation time, but circumstances require immediate action. Han Wu nodded, understanding the situation perfectly. His training had taught him that no plan survived contact with the enemy. Adaptation and improvisation were more valuable than perfect preparation, sir, he replied simply. Earth forces are ready for any contingency. We have been preparing for this war since the day we joined the Federation. The room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. While alien species had assumed humans were peaceful newcomers, Earth had been quietly building one of the most effective military forces in galactic history. Captain Min Ji activated a holographic display showing the current positions of hostile fleets. The red dots representing enemy forces formed a rough circle around human space, but there were gaps that could be exploited. Our stealth ships have been monitoring their movements, she explained. Enemy commanders assume we have no intelligence gathering capabilities. They are communicating on channels we have been intercepting for years. Earth had secretly developed technology that surpassed most galactic standards while maintaining the appearance of being technologically inferior. The element of surprise would be crucial in the coming battles. The first attack was expected within days as reptilian forces moved into position around the human colony of New Seoul. The settlement was home to 3 million people and served as a major industrial center for human space. Colonel Dong Hyen had already deployed his special forces teams to defensive positions around the colony. His soldiers were hidden in locations that alien scanners could not detect, waiting for the perfect moment to spring their trap. The plan was simple but elegant. Human forces would allow the enemy to believe they were winning while carefully manipulating the battle to create maximum confusion. Every alien advantage would be turned into a liability through precise tactical execution. Admiral Jin Su dismissed the meeting with final orders that had been planned for years. Remember, he told his commanders, we are not fighting to prove we are strong, we are fighting to survive, and that makes us dangerous. As the officers left to prepare their forces, Earth began revealing capabilities that had been hidden for decades. Ships that had appeared to be civilian transports uncloaked to reveal advanced weapon systems. Orbital platforms powered up defense grids that could stop entire fleets. The galaxy had assumed Earth was weak because humans appeared peaceful, but they had confused restraint with inability. Human forces had been waiting for this moment when survival demanded the use of their full capabilities. In space above Earth, the first elements of the defense fleet began moving into position. These were not the primitive ships that alien observers had been allowed to see, but vessels incorporating technology that would shock even advanced species. The war that was coming would reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. Alien species that had ruled through strength for millennia were about to discover that intelligence and adaptability were more powerful than size and weapons. Humanity was ready to teach the galaxy a lesson that had been learned through millions of years of evolution on a hostile world. Sometimes the most dangerous predator was the one that did not look threatening. Time seemed to stop in the massive broadcasting hall. The sound of Hyen Wu's fist connecting with Tay Min's skull rang out like a bell being struck by a hammer. Every being in the audience heard it clearly despite the size of the arena. The noise cut through space and silence with terrifying finality. Tay Min's massive frame froze in mid-attack. His 8-foot body remained suspended for a heartbeat, with his huge fist still extended toward where Hyen Wu had been standing. The reptilian warrior's yellow eyes went wide with shock and confusion as his brain tried to process what had just happened. Green blood began to trickle from behind his left eye ridge where Hyen Wu's knuckles had found their target. The impact point was no bigger than a coin, but the damage spreading through his skull was catastrophic. The human had struck with surgical precision at exactly the right spot for one impossible moment. The greatest warrior in the reptilian defense force stood perfectly still like a statue carved from green stone, his mouth open slightly showing his razor Sharp teeth but no sound came out. The crowd watched in stunned silence as reality began to set in then. Taemin's legs buckled beneath him, his massive body tilted forward. Slowly at first, then faster as gravity took control. 8 feet and 400 pounds of muscle and scale crashed to the arena floor with a sound like a building. Collapsing, the impact shook the entire platform. His skull had been completely crushed. By a single perfectly placed punch, the bone structure that had withstood energy weapons and explosive blasts had been shattered by one human fist. The medical scanners immediately detected no brain activity, no heartbeat, no life signs at all. Green blood pooled around Taemin's head, spreading across the white arena floor in an expanding circle. His yellow eyes stared sightlessly at the ceiling while his body lay motionless. The warrior who had killed hundreds of enemies in dozens of battles was dead before he hit the ground. The entire sequence from the beginning of the fight to Taemin's death had taken exactly 2 seconds. Hyen Wu straightened up and calmly adjusted his shirt sleeves. His breathing was still steady and controlled, as if he had just completed a simple training exercise. He looked down at the massive corpse without emotion, then turned and bowed respectfully toward the fallen warrior. The arena medical team rushed forward with their advanced equipment, but everyone already knew it was too late. Emergency scanners confirmed what the crowd's eyes could plainly see. Commander Taemin was beyond any medical intervention available in the galaxy. So Young sat frozen in her chair, staring at the impossible scene. Before her, she had expected to watch Hyen Wu die horribly on live television. Instead, she was witnessing the most shocking upset in galactic military history. The small human had killed a legendary reptilian warrior in 2 seconds. The camera drones buzzed frantically around the arena, trying to capture every angle of the aftermath. Billions of viewers across thousands of worlds watched in disbelief as instant replays showed the fight from multiple perspectives. Each replay confirmed the same impossible truth. Emergency broadcasts interrupted regular programming on every major network across the galaxy. News anchors struggled to find words to describe what had just happened. The fastest combat victory in recorded galactic history had been achieved by a member of the galaxy's supposedly weakest species in the reptilian section. The other warriors sat in stunned silence. Their greatest champion, their undefeated commander, their symbol of species superiority, lay dead on the arena floor, killed by a creature they had considered barely above an animal. Their worldview was crumbling in real time. The floating referee finally managed to speak, its electronic voice trembling with uncertainty. Combat concluded, it announced unnecessarily. Winner Lieutenant Najen Wu Park, representing Earth and the human species. Time elapsed 2.3 seconds. The crowd remained silent for several more heartbeats as the full implications began to sink in. Then slowly whispers began to spread through the alien sections. Some beings leaned forward to get better looks at the human. Others sat back in their seats with new expressions of wariness. Hyen Wu walked calmly back toward the human section, his footsteps the only sound in the massive hall. He retrieved his military jacket from the soldier who was holding it and put it back on with the same methodical precision he had shown before the fight. As he sat down next to Dr. So Young, she finally found her voice. How she whispered, barely audible, "How did you do that?" Hyen Wu looked at her with those same calm dark eyes. "I identified a structural weakness in his skull," he replied simply. "Applied force at the optimal angle and velocity. The cranial structure of his species has a fatal flaw behind the left optical ridge." His explanation was delivered in the same professional tone he might use to describe repairing equipment. The fact that he had just killed the most feared warrior in the galaxy seemed to have no emotional impact on him whatsoever. Dr. So Young realized she was looking at something she had never encountered before. A human being who had been shaped by Earth's military into a perfect weapon. Hyen Wu was not just a soldier, he was the product of thousands of years of human warfare refined into its most deadly form. The medical team finally finished their examination and began removing Taemin's body from the arena. The crowd watched in fascination as they struggled to lift the massive corpse. It took 6 alien medics to carry what one human had destroyed with a single punch. News feeds across the galaxy exploded with analysis and commentary. Military experts tried to explain how such a small creature could generate enough force to crush reinforced bone. Biologists began emergency studies of human anatomy looking for hidden advantages. They had missed political leaders from dozens of worlds, called emergency sessions to discuss the implications. Economic markets fluctuated wildly as traders tried to figure out what this meant for existing power structures. Trade agreements that had been in place for centuries suddenly seemed questionable. The Galactic Federation Council received thousands of urgent communications demanding explanations, investigations, and immediate action. Species that had dominated through military might for millennia were suddenly faced with the possibility that they had been wrong about everything. But in the broadcasting hall, the most important reaction was happening in the alien sections themselves. Warriors who had laughed at human weakness now looked at Hyun Woo with undisguised fear and respect. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in 2 seconds, and everyone knew it. The aftermath of the fight spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communications could carry. Emergency broadcasts interrupted scheduled programming on millions of worlds while news networks scrambled to analyze footage of the impossible 2-second battle on the reptilian homeworld of Saurus Prime. The High Command gathered in their war chamber for an emergency session. A massive stone room had witnessed the planning of countless military campaigns, but never a crisis like this. Their greatest warrior was dead, killed by a creature they had considered harmless. General Kyung Soo, the eldest member of the reptilian military leadership, slammed his massive fist on the conference table. The impact cracked the solid granite surface, but his anger was beyond physical expression. "This is impossible," he roared, his voice echoing off the chamber walls. The other generals nodded in agreement while watching replay footage on the huge screens that dominated the room. They had studied the fight from every possible angle, enhanced the images, analyzed the biomechanics, and still could not accept what they were seeing. Commander Taemin was a perfect warrior, another general named Jaewon stated flatly. He had trained since childhood, survived the border wars, killed hundreds of enemies in personal combat. How could one small human destroy him so easily? The military scientists who had been called in to analyze the footage offered technical explanations about leverage, angles, and force multiplication, but the generals were not interested in physics. They wanted someone to blame for their humiliation across the galaxy. Similar emergency meetings were taking place in government buildings and military headquarters. Species that had built their reputations on physical dominance were suddenly questioning everything they thought they knew about galactic power structures. On the crystal world of Prism 7, the Crystalline Council held an urgent session in their great diamond chamber. The light beings who ruled that world communicated through color changes that flashed across their transparent bodies. Fear showed as deep red flickers, while uncertainty appeared as shifting purple patterns. The Shadow Walkers of Umbral Prime emerged from their hidden cities for the first time in decades to discuss the implications. Their dark forms gathered in the abandoned ruins that served as their meeting places, speaking in whispers about the change that was coming. Meanwhile, on Earth, the reaction was completely different. Admiral Jin-Soo Kim sat in his office at Earth Military Command, watching news reports with growing satisfaction. He had been waiting 20 years for the galaxy to see what human soldiers could really do. The phone on his desk had been ringing constantly with calls from alien ambassadors requesting meetings, trade negotiations, and alliance discussions. Species that had ignored Earth for decades were suddenly very interested in human friendship. Dr. So Young found herself at the center of a diplomatic storm as reporters from across the galaxy demanded interviews. The small human section of the broadcasting station had been surrounded by alien journalists who wanted to understand how such a peaceful-looking species could produce such deadly warriors. "I must speak with this Hyun-Woo Park," demanded a reporter from the gas giant Confederacy. Its voice came through a translation device that made it sound like wind through metal pipes. How did he learn to fight like that? What training did he receive? So Young looked around for Hyun-Woo, but the Navy SEAL had disappeared shortly after the fight. He had simply walked away from the chaos without speaking to anyone, leaving her to handle all the questions. She realized she knew almost nothing about his background or abilities. The human military files were classified, but she managed to contact Earth Command for basic information. What she learned made her understand why Hyun-Woo had been so confident. Navy SEALs were among the most elite soldiers Earth had ever produced. These Men underwent years of training that would kill most beings from other species. They learned to fight in every environment against any opponent using any weapon or no weapons at all. They were the products of human warfare's most brutal evolution, but even that information did not fully explain what had happened in the arena. The precision of Hyun Woo's strike suggested knowledge of alien anatomy that should have been impossible for a human to possess, yet somehow he had identified the exact weakness in reptilian skull structure. As news of the fight continued spreading, the political implications became clear. Species throughout the galaxy began reassessing their relationships with Earth trade. Routes that had bypassed human space for decades were suddenly being rerouted toward Earth colonies. The peaceful traders who controlled much of the galaxy's commerce sent urgent messages offering favorable deals. They had built their business on avoiding conflict, and if humans were as dangerous as the fight suggested, peace with Earth was essential. Economic markets across the galaxy fluctuated wildly as investors tried to understand what the change in military balance would mean. Stocks and reptilian defense contractors crashed while anything connected to Earth technology skyrocketed. The Galactic Federation Council called for an emergency session to address the crisis that was developing. Every member species wanted answers about human capabilities and intentions. The careful balance of power that had maintained peace for centuries was suddenly uncertain, but not everyone was interested in peaceful solutions. The Mantis Collective had built their empire on conquest and expansion. They saw the new situation as an opportunity rather than a threat. If humans were truly dangerous, they needed to be eliminated before they became stronger. Secret communications began flowing between aggressive species across the galaxy. Military alliances that had been dormant for years were suddenly reactivated as plans formed for coordinated action against Earth. The Reptilian Empire, despite their public humiliation, was still the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Their leaders burned with desire for revenge against the species that had killed their champion. They began mobilizing battle fleets while publicly demanding a rematch on Earth. Admiral Jin Su received intelligence reports about the military buildup happening across the galaxy. Alien fleets were moving toward human space while weapons production increased on dozens of hostile worlds. He called a meeting of Earth's top military leaders in the secure bunker beneath Earth Command. The room filled with generals, admirals, and special forces, commanders who had been preparing for this moment since first contact with alien species. Gentlemen, Admiral Jin Su began, we always knew this day would come. The galaxy has underestimated us for 20 years, but that era is ending. They think one victory means we are lucky, but we know the truth. The assembled officers nodded, understanding what their commander meant. Human military doctrine had been developed through thousands of years of warfare against other humans. Every conflict had taught lessons that were refined into doctrine. Earth had produced warriors who could adapt to any situation, overcome any opponent, and win battles that seemed impossible. Other species had evolved natural weapons, but humans had evolved something more dangerous: the ability to think their way through any problem. As alien fleets gathered at the borders of human space, Earth began revealing capabilities that had been hidden for decades. Stealth ships that had been secretly patrolling the outer systems uncloaked and reported to duty. Weapons that could bypass alien shields powered up for the first time. The galaxy was about to learn that underestimating humanity was a mistake they would not get a chance to repeat. The attack on New Sol began exactly as Earth Command had predicted. 3 reptilian battle fleets dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, expecting to find a lightly defended human colony ripe for destruction. Their massive ships blotted out the stars as they moved toward the planet. Admiral Sung-ho commanded the lead reptilian fleet from his flagship, a massive dreadnought called Death's Claw. The ship was 2 miles long and bristled with enough weapons to level entire continents. His yellow eyes gleamed with anticipation as he prepared to avenge Commander Taemin. The humans will learn the price of defying the reptilian empire, he announced to his bridge crew. Today, we show the galaxy that killing one of our warriors brings swift and terrible punishment. These soft creatures will burn for their arrogance. But as the alien fleets approached the colony, they found something unexpected. Instead of fleeing in terror, the human defenders seemed to be welcoming the attack. The orbital stations around New Sol powered up their weapons and began broadcasting surrender demands in Galactic Standard Colonel Donghayan. Li watched the approaching enemy from his hidden command post deep beneath the colony's surface. His weathered face showed no emotion as hundreds of alien warships filled the space above his world. He had been waiting for this moment his entire career. The reptilian admiral received the human surrender transmission and laughed at what he considered typical Earth cowardice. These pathetic beings were offering to give up without a fight, just as he had expected they would prepare boarding parties. Admiral Sung-ho ordered, "We will accept their surrender, then execute every human on this world as an example. To the galaxy, no species kills a reptilian warrior and lives to celebrate it." The first mistake the aliens made was assuming the surrender offer was genuine, while Admiral Sung-ho positioned his ships to accept the colony's capitulation. Human forces were moving into carefully prepared positions. The second mistake was bringing their entire fleet into close orbit around New Sol. The massive alien ships were designed for space combat, not the kind of asymmetric warfare that human forces had perfected over centuries of conflict. As boarding shuttles launched from the reptilian ships toward the colony's spaceports, Colonel Dong Hyan's hidden forces began their counterattack. Small teams of human soldiers emerged from concealed positions and began infiltrating the alien vessels. The infiltration was possible because Earth intelligence had spent years studying alien ship designs. Every weakness in reptilian technology had been cataloged and exploited. The humans moved through maintenance shafts and service corridors that the enemy never thought to guard. Lieutenant Hyan Wu led one of the infiltration teams aboard Admiral Sung-ho's flagship. His mission was to reach the command center and neutralize the enemy leadership before they realized what was happening. The Navy SEAL moved through the ship's corridors like a ghost. His team of 6 specialists followed behind him, each one trained to operate in hostile environments. Against overwhelming odds, they encountered reptilian crew members but eliminated them silently. Meanwhile, on the surface of New Sol, the apparent surrender was revealed as an elaborate deception. The orbital defense platforms that had seemed to be powering down suddenly came online with weapons that no alien had ever seen before. The new Earth technology bypassed reptilian shields completely. The energy weapons cut through enemy armor like it was made of paper instead of advanced composite materials. Alien ships that had seemed invincible moments before began exploding in brilliant flashes. Admiral Sung-ho watched in horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed by weapons that should not have existed. "How is this possible?" he roared at his bridge crew. "Our intelligence report said the humans had primitive technology," but before anyone could answer, Hyan Wu and his team burst onto the bridge. The human soldiers moved with perfect coordination, eliminating the bridge crew in seconds. Admiral Sung-ho found himself facing the same species that had killed Commander Tae Min-yu. He gasped, recognizing the calm, dark eyes that had become famous across the galaxy. "You are the human who murdered our greatest warrior in the arena." Hyan Wu looked at the massive reptilian admiral without emotion. "I am Lieutenant Hyan Wu Park of Earth Naval Special Warfare Command," he replied professionally. "You are now my prisoner and your fleet is destroyed." The battle that Admiral Sung-ho had expected to last minutes stretched into hours as human tactics turned every alien advantage into a liability. The superior numbers meant nothing when the enemy could not find their opponents to fight. Then human soldiers appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking at command center's communication arrays and weapon systems before vanishing back into hiding. Their knowledge of alien technology allowed them to disable entire ships from within. The rigid reptilian command structure collapsed when key leaders were eliminated. Human forces had studied their enemies for years and knew exactly which targets would cause maximum disruption to alien operations. As news of the battle spread across the galaxy, other alien fleets began hesitating in their planned attacks. The impossible was happening again. Human forces were not just surviving against overwhelming odds, they were winning decisively. The Mantis Collective received reports from their spy networks that made their insectoid leaders question everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. The small defensive force at New Sol had destroyed 3 entire reptilian battle fleets. Emergency sessions were called in government buildings across the galaxy as species that had been planning to attack Earth suddenly reconsidered Their options, the balance of power was shifting faster than anyone had believed possible. Within 6 months of the original broadcast, every aggressive alien species had requested peace negotiations. The Galactic Federation Council rewrote its charter, giving Earth full member status with veto power over all military actions. Trade routes across the galaxy were redesigned to favor human space as economic opportunities flowed toward the species that had proven themselves capable of defending their interest. The old order based on physical dominance was crumbling. Admiral Jin Su stood in his office, looking out at the stars that had once seemed hostile to human expansion. Now those same stars represented unlimited opportunities for a species that had proven itself worthy of respect. The final irony came when Hyun Woo was invited to address the same Galactic Federation Council that had once ignored Earth. The Navy SEAL stood before representatives of thousands of species and delivered a message that changed everything. Fellow beings of the galaxy, he began in his calm, professional voice. Earth seeks only peace and cooperation with all species, but we have learned through hard experience that peace must be defended by those willing to fight for it. The applause that followed was genuine and respectful, unlike the polite clapping from the original broadcast. This was recognition of strength and capability. Every being present understood that humanity had earned its place among the galaxy's great powers, and in the end that was all humans had ever wanted. Not domination or conquest, but simple recognition that they belonged among the stars. The galaxy had learned to respect the human smile because behind it lay the strength to defend everything they valued.